Forget your wedding. What good will it bring us? My mother said it first. Bethany needs us. My father nodded like a judge. We're still helping your sister. I swallowed the yes I was trained to give. Since we helped you, Dad added at dinner. Hand the house to your sister. She's the real family, Mom breathed, pleased with herself. I need this house, Bethany whispered, already measuring rooms. I'd invited them after Derek's parents funded everything. They also gifted us a home in Meadowbrook Hills. 4 bedrooms, windows full of sky. I'm Emma Morrison, residential architect, the daughter who was never the priority. When I said no, my mother slapped me. Before the sting cooled, my father shoved me outside. The house belongs to Bethany, he declared. Have you faced this kind of love? Tell me in the comments. They didn't want my joy. They wanted the deed. Growing up as the second Morrison daughter meant learning how to disappear politely. Bethany was 3 years older, blonde, radiant, and apparently born to be adored. She got piano lessons. I got a hand-me-down recorder and a shrug. When she turned 16, she got a car. I got a birthday card with $20 inside. Dad said, we can't play favorites. But favorites were all they ever played. College? They paid for her theater degree. I got spreadsheets explaining why community college was the smarter path. I worked 3 jobs to transfer to a university. Graduated with honors. They didn't come to the ceremony. Mom said, it's too far. They drove 6 hours the next weekend for Bethany's regional fashion show. By the time I met Derek, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. Approval, affection, even acknowledgement. All optional. Derek's parents, Margaret and Thomas Chen, were the opposite of everything I'd known. They remembered details, asked about my work, listened. When Derek proposed, I called my parents, voice shaking with hope. That's nice, honey, Mom said flatly. We're busy helping Bethany choose venues. I sat there, ring in sunlight, listening to the echo of indifference. Every childhood memory sharpened that moment. Each time I was told to wait, each birthday skipped, each small triumph ignored. I realized love in our house wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. Bethany was the investment. I was the expense. So when they said, forget your wedding, it wasn't new. It was confirmation. But pain has a way of planting resolve. And this time, I decided not to beg for scraps. In our house, love wore Bethany's name tag. After that call, something inside me shut off. Not in anger, in survival. I stopped reaching out first. Stopped trying to make them proud. Silence became self-defense. Derek's parents filled the quiet my own family left behind. Margaret insisted on hosting our engagement dinner. Thomas gave a toast that ended with, Emma, welcome home. I nearly cried at the word home. Planning the wedding felt like walking 2 timelines. One filled with warmth, one with ghosts. When I told Mom about the date, she said, hope it doesn't overlap Bethany's events. Not congratulations, just logistics. I tried one last time to include them. Lunch downtown, a binder of color palettes and venue plans. I thought maybe organization could earn affection. Bethany arrived 20 minutes late, complaining about traffic and her followers dropping. Dad cut into his steak mid-sentence. We're stretched thin, honey. Beth's wedding takes priority. I'm not asking for money, I said. Just your support. Mom sighed. What good will it bring us? Bethany smirked over her phone. Your wedding isn't even exciting, Emma. No offense. Offense taken. Deeply. Quietly. I paid the bill myself. They didn't offer. That night, I called Derek, voice trembling with a grief I couldn't name. He listened, then said, come over. My parents want to talk. At the Chen house, Margaret hugged me so tightly, I forgot how to breathe. Thomas set down his tea. Emma, we'd like to fund your wedding, he said, fully, however you envision it. I burst into tears. Then Derek added softly, there's something else. My parents want to gift us a home. For a moment, I couldn't speak. A house. In Meadowbrook Hills. 4 bedrooms, stone and cedar, backing onto a nature preserve. Thomas smiled. You deserve to live in peace. I thought about my father's spreadsheets, my mother's sighs, Bethany's sneer, all the ways they'd measured my worth and convenience. Here, love wasn't a transaction. It was a gift, freely given. But still, a small voice whispered, what if it vanishes too? That night, I sat by my drafting table, sketching a sunlit house. Not for work. For me, the lines came steady, peaceful. Walls built from trust. Windows wide enough for joy. No locks, no alarms. I smiled through the quiet. Maybe this was what safety felt like. Margaret placed a velvet box in my hand. Inside, a pearl bracelet with a jade clasp. Family tradition, she said. Wear it on your wedding day. I wore it every day after that. Every glance reminded me I was loved, even without earning it. If care was real, why did it have conditions? The wedding day was flawless. Sunlight spilled through the garden like it was rooting for us. Derek cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. I thought, maybe this is what peace feels like. Until dinner, my parents arrived 30 minutes late. Bethany wore white, of course. They smiled too wide, like people pretending not to be jealous. During cocktail hour, Bethany said suddenly, "We should stop by your new house. I want to see it." Her tone made it sound like an inspection. Against my better judgment, I agreed. 15 minutes later, a black car pulled up to Meadowbrook Hills. Sunlight hit the stone facade like gold. I felt proud until I saw their faces. Bethany's smile froze. "This is yours?" Derek nodded. "A gift from my parents." Silence stretched. Then Bethany's voice turned sharp. "My wedding is coming up. I need this house." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. It's perfect for Marcus and me." Mom nodded instantly. "Yes, honey. Anything for you." Something inside me snapped. "This is our home," I said. "Not available." Dad sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Don't be selfish, Emma. Family helps family." Back at the hotel, I was fixing my lipstick when they barged into the bridal suite uninvited. Bethany followed, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," Dad said. "Can it wait until after dinner?" "No. Since we helped you with this wedding, we'd like you to hand over the house to your sister." I turned slowly from the mirror. "You helped me?" "You owe us," Mom hissed. "Bethany's always been the real family." My laugh came out cold. "You didn't contribute a single dollar. You just showed up, and even that felt like charity." Mom's face twisted. "After everything we did for you, raising you, feeding you, you mean the bare minimum required by law?" I shot back. That's when she slapped me. The sound cracked through the room like lightning. Before I could react, Dad grabbed my arm and shoved me outside. "The house belongs to Bethany," he barked. Guests froze. Phones lifted. People recorded. Bethany stood in the doorway, arms crossed like she'd won. Then Thomas appeared behind her. "Emma," he said calmly, "should I explain the ownership clause?" I smiled through the sting on my cheek. "Please do." Thomas faced my parents. "The house is held in the Chen family trust. Emma and Derek have lifetime residence rights, but they can't sell, gift, or transfer it. If anyone tries to pressure them, ownership reverts back to us immediately." Bethany's smile died. Mom whispered, "There must be another way." "There isn't," Thomas said, eyes like ice. "And after what I just witnessed, you'll never set foot on that property again." They came for my house. They left without their dignity. Security arrived before I even caught my breath. Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. "Escort them out." Dad puffed up, trying to sound in control. "You can't throw us out. We're family." Margaret stepped forward. "You're trespassers now." Her tone could have frozen fire. 2 guards guided them toward the side exit. Bethany twisted in their grip. "You tricked us!" she screamed. I looked her dead in the eye. "I just got married, Beth. You started a war I didn't invite." The ballroom went quiet when I walked back in. Guests pretended to eat, pretending they hadn't seen. But half the room already knew. By midnight, so did the internet. Someone had posted the hallway video. My mother's slap. My father's shove. Bethany's demand for the house. It spread faster than wedding confetti. Bethany's influencer account exploded. Not in followers, but backlash. Comments tore through her polished captions. Entitled "Sister Steals Bride's House." Family drama, live edition. Her sponsors dropped her within days. Vendors withdrew from her wedding. The fairy tale collapsed in real time. Mom called first. Then Dad. Then Aunt Denise. All blocked. They showed up at the house twice. The gate camera caught Mom yelling, "Emma, we can fix this!" I turned the footage over to security. Thomas called his lawyer the next morning. Within 48 hours, a no-contact order was in place. I didn't cry. Didn't rage. Didn't even flinch. I just exhaled. Bethany's wedding happened 4 months later. A cousin sent me photos. Community center. Folding chairs. Off-the-rack dress that didn't fit right. She smiled like she wasn't breaking. People whispered that I'd won. But it never felt like winning. It felt like finally dropping a weight I'd carried since childhood. The Chen family protected me fiercely. Margaret said, "You don't owe them forgiveness. Thomas added. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. I believed him. I returned to work, sharper than ever. Every blueprint I drew carried a hidden truth. You can build a life stronger than what broke you. The viral video faded, but my name didn't. Clients came, curious about the architect who stood up. I let them talk. I kept designing. At night, Derek and I ate dinner. On the balcony of the house they wanted. Deer sometimes wandered through the trees behind us. I'd watch them and whisper to the wind, "Let peace stay this time." Bethany sent a message months later. "I'm sorry. I read it once, then deleted it. Some apologies are just nostalgia for control." A year passed before I opened their last letter. It wasn't an apology, just a Christmas card. Thinking of you, signed in blue ink. No accountability, no change. I tucked it into a drawer with the others. Not out of bitterness, just closure. By then, my life was unrecognizable. I'd made partner at my firm. Designed homes that carried laughter, not ghosts. Derek and I filled ours with light and quiet rituals. Sunday pancakes, morning walks. Shared silence that felt like safety. Margaret still called me sweetheart. Thomas still said, "We're proud of you." Words my parents never learned how to mean. Sometimes I'd think about Bethany. Her failed brand, her silence. The way she once believed everything was hers by default. I didn't hate her anymore. I just stopped needing her to understand. Healing didn't come with fireworks. It came with normal days. Making coffee, drafting blueprints, hearing Derek hum off-key in the kitchen. It came from realizing peace isn't loud. It's steady. When I became pregnant, the first person I told wasn't my mother. It was Margaret. She cried, and I cried with her. Our daughter, Clara, was born on a spring morning. Tiny, fierce, and whole. As I held her, I thought, this is how it should have been all along. Love without demand. Care without debt. Mom never met her. Neither did Dad. And that was okay, because the family I lost was nothing compared to the one I built. If you've ever had to choose between peace and obligation, choose peace. You won't regret it. They raised a daughter who finally learned. Love doesn't owe them interest.
The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the ice melt in their glasses. 300 guests. 40 years of Everly legacy gleaming in crystal chandeliers, curated floral arches, and the kind of white linen silence only money could command. And then there was me, Claire Everly, the disappointment daughter, standing in a crimson gown that wasn't approved, holding the microphone they never meant for me to touch. My mother blinked once. My father shifted in his chair, the kind of movement that meant this isn't part of the program. But I didn't come to follow a script. The last time I stood in this room, I was being fitted for a wedding dress I didn't choose for a marriage I didn't want. Back then, I didn't say a word. Tonight, I would. Not to wound, not to accuse, just to return something they never expected the truth. But before I speak, before I let these walls hear what they tried to bury, I need to tell you how we got here. Because if you've ever been told to sit down, smile, and let the family protect its image, then maybe you already know what I'm about to say. I grew up in a house where nothing was ever loud except silence. Our home sat on a hill in Brookline, Massachusetts, framed by boxwood hedges and expectations. There were rules about volume posture linens and eye contact, but never about love. Love wasn't a word we used. Approval had better posture. My mother, Lucinda Everly, believed in refinement. She curated people like she did floral arrangements, well-placed, well-lit, never wilting in public. She wasn't cruel exactly. She just had no use for things she couldn't control. Emotions, questions. Me. My younger sister Nora absorbed her training better. She was gentle, quiet, good at vanishing in plain sight. I used to envy that. I, on the other hand, asked things. Why can't I wear blue instead of cream? Why can't we eat with the staff? Why did Daddy miss Christmas? The answers were always the same, because Everlys don't do that. It took me a long time to understand that Everly wasn't just a name. It was a script. You followed it, or you didn't exist. By 12, I was attending etiquette school on Saturdays. By 15, I could pour tea without a ripple. By 17, I could spot a loose hem on a debutante dress from 20 feet away. What I couldn't spot until it was too late was the cost. You don't notice the price of obedience until your voice has gone missing for so long you forget what it sounded like. My father, Douglas, wasn't cruel either, but he understood investments, and I had been groomed to yield social returns, a Princeton degree, fluent in French, quiet ambition, the kind that fits in heels. Once I told him I wanted to work in fashion, not modeling, but building something. He smiled like I had said I wanted to open a lemonade stand. That's sweet, Claire. But you're in Everly. That was always the ending. Whatever you dreamed, they'd translate it back into who they thought you should be. And for a while, I let them. Until I made the mistake of trying to build something of my own. I was 27 when I finally stepped out of their frame. I didn't scream. I didn't rebel. I simply signed a lease on a narrow storefront on Newberry Street, painted the walls a soft matte gray, and gave it a name, Everly Atelier. It wasn't just a boutique, it was a statement. A quiet refusal. I used my inheritance, what little I had early access to, and paired it with seed money from my father. You'll learn something, he said as he wrote the check. Not encouragement. A warning. The store opened in spring. Our inventory curated pieces from emerging American designers' names no one knew yet but would. I remember the first sale. A woman tried on a copper silk wrap coat and stood taller like she'd remembered herself. I cried in the stockroom. My partner, Mira Carrington, was sharp-driven, socially connected. She'd been introduced through one of my mother's charity friends. Mira handled supplier contracts and vendor accounts. I focused on styling, storytelling, client relationships. 3 months in, we were featured in Boston Interiors. A Vogue editor walked through. We were booked for weeks, and then the invoices didn't match. The bank balance dipped. The accountant called. There's a discrepancy. By the time I arrived at the shop, Mira was gone. Her email deactivated. Her name never existed on the lease. We owed nearly $260,000 to vendors, all in my name. I sat on the shop floor that night and stared at a bolt of emerald silk I had hand-picked 2 weeks earlier. It looked like a flag-waving surrender. The next week, my name appeared in the Globe's business section under the words, "Socialite mismanages funds." The worst part wasn't the headlines. It was the smile my mother wore when I came home. "Claire," she sighed. "Next time ask for help before you embarrass us." She made it sound like charity. It felt like claws. Within days, the boutique closed. The Everly PR team took control of the narrative. My father reclaimed the lease. My mother held a charity brunch to support young entrepreneurs the same week she locked me out of my condo. They called it a transition. They said they were protecting me. They said, "It's time you accepted your place." And because I had no money, no apartment, no reputation left, I did. But something in me stayed awake, something small and sharp that wouldn't lie flat again. The proposal wasn't made with flowers or a ring. It came in the form of a Tuesday meeting in the formal sitting room. My father sat in his usual leather chair, pretending to read. My mother stood by the fireplace like a judge preparing a verdict. Across from them sat a man I didn't recognize, gray suit, polite hands, and no intention of smiling. "Claire," my mother said, "this is Miles Carter. He's agreed to marry you." I almost laughed. I waited for anyone to say it was a joke. No one did. "You've been given every advantage," my father said, still not looking at me. "This marriage will stabilize the narrative. It will give you structure." Narrative. That was the word they used when truth became inconvenient. "You'll have an apartment," my mother continued, "and a position at Everly Development. It's modest, but it's a start if you're serious about rebuilding." "And if I wasn't, then you'll need to leave this house," she said simply. "With what's yours." Which, Claire, isn't much. They called it an opportunity. But what they meant was obedience or exile. I looked at Miles. He offered a slight nod. Nothing in his posture was cruel, but nothing invited trust either. I turned to my sister Nora, who was standing just beyond the doorframe. Her eyes didn't widen. She already knew. That was the moment that broke me more than anything, realizing this had been in motion for weeks, months maybe. What if I say no? My mother adjusted her bracelet. "Then I hope you've learned how to live without the Everly name." And so, 2 months after losing my business, my home, and the version of myself I had just begun to know, I agreed to marry a man I'd met twice because it was the only option that let me stay warm. And in that moment, I thought the humiliation had finally reached its end. I didn't know it was just the curtain rising. The wedding was held in the back garden of the Everly estate, surrounded by flowers that bloomed on cue and faces that knew better than to look surprised. My dress was simple ivory, no lace, no train, nothing that suggested celebration, only containment. The guest list had been trimmed from 300 to 50, given the circumstances, my mother said. When Miles took my hand at the altar, it was warm, steady, unremarkable, not cruel, not kind, just practiced. He wore a suit that fit, but barely. His tie was forgettable. His vows were polite. And when the photographer asked for a smile, I gave the one my mother had rehearsed into me since age 6. It held like porcelain. Our wedding gifts were symbolic practical cookware. 1-year leases, a starter salary. No heirloom silver, no Paris honeymoon, just an apartment and a job at Everly Development front desk entry level, no title. I moved into a 3rd-floor walk-up in South Boston. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, beige everything. Mother had chosen the furniture herself. Neutral tones encouraged reflection. The master bedroom had 2 twin beds. Miles didn't object. He said, "You take whichever side feels less wrong." Every morning he left for work in a Civic. Every evening he returned on-time dinner in hand voice low. He never pried, never raised his voice, never touched me. I once called it a holding cell with polite lighting. He didn't argue, but there were things that didn't sit right. His office small locked always. The calls he took late at night in a tone far too confident for someone in junior consulting. The way he never flinched when I snapped, never indulged my bitterness, never offered false comfort, as if he knew exactly how long the storm would last. One evening, I forgot to take out the trash and cried for 40 minutes over the sound of the lid clicking shut. When I apologized to him out of habit more than guilt, he simply handed me tea and said, "You don't have to earn kindness, Claire. You just have to recognize it." And I remember thinking, who says that? Not a man who married a disgraced socialite out of pity. Not someone who just needed a tax break or family favor. No, something about Miles didn't add up. But at the time, I was too tired to do the math. And maybe that's exactly what they were counting on. By our 3rd month of marriage, I knew something was off. Not just with Miles, with everything. He kept a schedule, but I couldn't trace where he worked. He mentioned clients, but no names. There were no business cards, no water cooler anecdotes. Just silence and expensive cufflinks that didn't match his salary. One night, I opened the wrong drawer in the kitchen and found a receipt for a dinner at the Mayflower Club, a private steakhouse. No one junior could afford it. When I asked him, he just said client meeting. I didn't order the wine. Then there were the names that showed up on our caller ID. Once I caught Gina L., another time Monarch exec office. I looked them up. Nothing came up, which meant everything was being hidden on purpose. But what reason would a man like Miles have to hide his power, not flaunt it? That question sat in my chest like a stone, and it only grew heavier the day I had lunch with Nora. She chose a little cafe far from our old circles. She looked different, simpler, as if she'd started choosing things for herself. We made small talk whether our dog when we were kids, how we both pretended not to hear arguments through the vents. Then she asked quietly, "Did you ever wonder why Mira was never investigated?" My hand froze on the coffee cup. "What do you mean?" She looked down. "You know how thorough our parents are. Background checks, references, board vetting. But Mira, she just showed up, got access, disappeared." I blinked. So maybe they let her in. Maybe someone made sure she got close. I couldn't breathe for a second. And then Nora said something even colder. "I don't think they just let you fall, Claire. I think they built the floor to break." She didn't stay long after that, but her words did. And suddenly, every silence I'd endured since the boutique started to sound like strategy. It started with the copier breaking. Miles was out. I needed to scan some legal forms for the Everly office, and our home printer had given up. I remembered he had a scanner in his study, his locked study. That day, he'd forgotten to take his keys. I stood at the door for a long moment. Then I opened it. There was no clutter, no mess. Just a minimalist space organized with surgical precision. A steel desk, 2 monitors, 1 leather notebook, and no trace of the man I married. I expected spreadsheets, binders, something boring. What I found, a Bloomberg terminal running in real time. Financial reports for companies I'd only seen in Forbes. A framed photo of Miles with a woman I didn't recognize shaking hands with the Secretary of Commerce. The desk drawer wasn't locked. Inside, a business card. White matte finish unmarked except for 3 embossed letters in platinum foil, MC Carter. I sat down. My hands shook as I typed. MC Carter, Monarch Capital, private equity, worth north of $4.8 billion, founder Miles Carter, reclusive, never photographed, never interviewed, known in investment circles as the Ghost King. My husband, the man who took out our trash and brought home takeout, the man who let me cry in silence without ever offering hollow words. He walked in 30 minutes later and didn't look surprised. I thought it might be today. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Every version of my marriage was collapsing into ash. He sat down across from me, calm. Claire, I agreed to the marriage under terms. Yes, but not for charity. Not to fix you. He pushed a file toward me. Inside emails between my mother and her longtime associate, Walter Dean. Payments wired to Mira Carrington 6 months before the boutique opened. Internal memos from Everly PR drafted before the scandal even occurred. They never believed you could stand on your own, Miles said quietly. So they made sure you couldn't. I stared at the page. Why are you showing me this because they thought you'd break? But you didn't. And I don't work with people who only survive. I invest in those who rise. He wasn't here to save me. He was here to show me the floor I fell through was a trap they built, and he thought I could still build something higher. I didn't cry that night. I thought I might. I thought I should. But instead, I slept for 9 hours straight without waking once. The next morning, Miles handed me coffee and a laptop. You'll need this, he said. Gina's expecting your call at 10. Gina Lopez, Monarch Capital's strategic director, former Wall Street risk analyst, known for turning failed brands into phoenixes. She greeted me like I already belonged. You don't need to be an MBA, Claire. You just need to remember the people who said you couldn't, and then prove they never understood what you were capable of. So I learned. I spent mornings in meetings, afternoons in spreadsheets, evenings in case studies. Gina mentored me. Miles challenged me. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't want to fix me, just expected me to show up ready. Meanwhile, we started to gather. Every email, every bank transfer, every forged signature Mira left behind. There were dates, timelines, photographs. Claire Everly. The failure wasn't careless. She'd been targeted, and Nora helped. Quietly at first. She sent archived messages, board minutes, a charity tax filing that showed Mira had once been compensated for consulting work under Lucinda's foundation. The picture sharpened. But this wasn't about vengeance. I wasn't out to destroy anyone. That would mean I still needed to fight for space in their world. No. I wanted something else entirely. To stand in their world, speak in my voice, and let it burn clean on its own. We chose the date carefully, my parents' 40th anniversary gala. 300 guests. The perfect stage. It won't be loud, Miles told me. It'll be surgical. I smiled. For the first time in months, I recognized the person behind it. I wasn't a girl they'd raised. I wasn't a wife they arranged. I wasn't a failure. I was the one holding the truth. And soon I'd hold the mic. The ballroom looked just like it had on my wedding day. Only this time I wasn't standing beside a stranger. I was standing beside myself. 300 guests. The elite of Boston's old families. Champagne and crystal. Laughter rehearsed. My parents stood near the stage basking in curated legacy. Lucinda wore navy, the Everly signature color. Douglas held a glass of scotch like it was a scepter. And I walked in crimson gown, no pearls, no apology. People turned, then turned again. Beside me was Miles, but not the version they knew. This Miles wore a tailored dark suit cufflinks that bore the Monarch insignia, and the quiet posture of a man no one dared underestimate. The whispers started, then froze when the MC announced, and now a few words from Claire Everly Carter. My mother's smile cracked just slightly. My father blinked. I stepped onto the stage into the light. The mic felt heavier than it should have. Thank you for being here. I began, my voice even. Tonight is about legacy, about what's built and what's buried beneath it. A pause. No music, just air thick with waiting. I'd like to tell you a story. I unfolded the first document, the Everly Foundation's donation logs. Dates, amounts. Mira's name hidden in plain sight under consultant services. Slide 2 emails between Lucinda and Walter Dean dated months before my boutique opened. Terms like control narrative, manage optics, and post-failure media sequence. The screen behind me lit up with excerpts, quiet gasps, a dropped fork. Slide 3 financial records vendor payments, rerouted tax discrepancies, a falsified accusation of mismanagement. I wasn't a failure, I said quietly. I was a strategy. Lucinda stepped forward. Claire, that's enough. I turned to her, voice calm. You once told me Everlys don't air family issues in public. But you made me the issue. You turned my name into a cautionary tale before I ever had a chance to speak. Then came the final slide, a formal press release announcing a new business clarity studio, an independent fashion incubator funded not by family but by Monarch Capital. I let it linger, then, one last twist, Miles stepped forward, not as my husband but as MC Carter founder and CEO. Half the room sat back. A few stood. My father's expression shifted from confusion to something close to fear. I looked out into the crowd and saw Nora. She wasn't seated near our parents. She had walked forward. She stood at the base of the stage alone. She gave one small nod. And that was it. No screaming, no blame, no spectacle. Just a shift in gravity that pulled the lies from their pedestal. Later that night, someone asked me how I stayed so composed. I smiled, soft and tired. When you've spent your life being told you don't belong in the spotlight, you learn how to make the truth shine even brighter. The apartment is smaller now. Mine. There's no staff, no curated silence, just hardwood floors and morning light that doesn't ask for permission. I painted the walls clay blue, the opposite of Everly cream. Miles and I still live together, but not as husband and wife in the traditional sense. We built something different. No titles, no script, just trust that didn't need to be performed. Clarity Studio opened last fall. We started with 3 designers, all women rejected from their former firms for being unmarketable. 2 have already launched collections. They thank me. I tell them don't, just build. Nora visits sometimes. She brings old photos, never stays too long. We don't speak about Lucinda or Douglas much. Their name still echoes in some rooms, but not in mine. I've learned that healing doesn't always look like reconnection. Sometimes it's a locked door you choose never to open again. Last week I walked past the Everly estate. The hedges were taller, the curtains drawn. The world still believes in their myth. But I don't. Because I know what it cost. And more importantly, I know what it didn't buy back. Tonight someone asked if I'd ever forgive them. I just looked out the window and said, they'll never know what it's like to hear your own voice and realize it's the first time it doesn't tremble. If you've ever been handed a version of your life that didn't sound like your own voice, just leave a dot. I've always been the quiet one, the reliable one fading into the background like wallpaper in my own family's story. Teaching history in Fort Collins fills my days grading papers, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening to teenagers argue over dates and names. I love the routine the way it holds me steady, but deep down I've wondered if I'm more than just good old Cammie. My parents saw me as their dependable daughter. Dad, with his stern rules, and Mom, soft but distant, always said I kept things together. My younger brother Chase was different, the golden child, a lawyer in Colorado Springs with a smile that won every room. Mom, half Lakota, buried that part of herself. It's just history, Cammie, she'd say, her voice closing off like a locked door. I never pressed her, afraid to stir up something raw. I spent my life smoothing edges, keeping peace, even when my heart felt like a tangled knot. At 39, I thought I knew who I was: a teacher, a daughter, a peacemaker. But that was before everything changed, before I realized how little I understood about myself, my family, or the legacy they left behind. The phone rang at dawn, shattering my sleep. A police officer's voice, cold and clipped, delivered the news. Your parents? Car accident. They didn't make it. I sat frozen, the tick of my kitchen clock pounding in my ears. The next days blurred, planning the funeral, signing papers, calling relatives while Chase barely showed. He arrived once in a sharp black suit, offering quick condolences before vanishing. "I'm swamped, Cammy," he texted. I swallowed the hurt and carried on. At the lawyer's office, the air smelled of old paper and wax. I sat across from Chase, his face unreadable as the lawyer's glasses slid down his nose. His voice droned through the will. "The Colorado Springs estate, all personal assets to Chase Hallbrook." Chase nodded like it was expected. "Then came my part, a cabin in Wyoming, no listed value of family significance, to Camille. A broken-down cabin out in nowhere." I stared at Chase, waiting for something, an explanation, a glance. "Guess Mom and Dad knew you liked quiet spots," he said, his tone light, almost patronizing. Those words cut deep, sharp as a blade. I clutched my crumpled tissue, my chest tight, wondering why my parents thought a crumbling shack was all I deserved. Back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. Eli, my boyfriend, paced the living room, his beer bottle clinking against the coffee table. "They screwed you over, Cammy. Why aren't you fighting this?" His voice was loud, frustrated. I tried to explain. I didn't want a battle, not now. Not with grief choking me. But Eli wouldn't hear it. "You let everyone walk all over you. I need a woman who fights for herself." The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I stood alone, staring at a family photo on the shelf. Mom's gentle smile, Dad's stern jaw, Chase's easy grin, and me half hidden in the corner. My whole life, I'd been the one to hold things together, to stay quiet. But now, with Mom and Dad gone, with Chase taking everything, with Eli walking out, I felt like I was unraveling. That cabin in Wyoming, some worthless pile of wood, kept nagging at me. Why did they leave it to me? What family significance could it possibly have? I grabbed my car keys, my hands shaking. Maybe that cabin held answers. Maybe it was time to find out what my parents saw in me, or what they didn't. The drive to Wyoming felt like running away, though I wasn't sure from what chased Eli or the ache in my chest. The highway stretched, endless sagebrush blurring past my window, the hum of my old sedan, the only sound. I gripped the wheel, the key to the cabin dangling from its rusty ring. When I reached the dirt road, dust swirled under my tires, and the cabin came into view, a sagging pile of logs, its roof half-caved, windows cloudy with grime. I stepped out, the air sharp with pine and decay. The door creaked, protesting as I pushed it open. Inside, the smell of rotting wood hit me, and every step made the floor groan like it resented my presence. Dust floated in slants of light, settling on a broken chair, a cracked lamp. This was my inheritance. I ran my fingers over a splintered table, feeling more lost than ever. Mom and Dad thought this place was for me, but standing there, I felt like a stranger in their memory. Yet something stirred, a faint pull, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. I sank onto the floor, my parents' faces flashing in my mind, their voices silent. This cabin was all I had left of them. I had to know why. I started cleaning more, to keep my hands busy than anything else. The broom scraped against the floor, stirring up dust that made me cough. I dragged a collapsed bookshelf from the wall, its wood crumbling under my touch. As it shifted, a hollow thud echoed behind it. I froze, heart pounding. I pushed harder, and part of the wall gave way, revealing a hidden door, its hinges rusted stiff. With a grunt, I pried it open, the squeal of metal piercing the silence. Inside was a small room, no bigger than a closet, lit by a sliver of light. My breath caught. There, on a wooden shelf, sat a feathered headdress, its eagle plumes soft and proud. Beside it, a drum, its hide taut despite years of neglect. Beaded moccasins, pottery etched with spirals, a bundle of sage all untouched like they'd been waiting. In the corner, a leather-bound journal lay half buried in dust. I brushed it clean, the leather cool under my fingers. The name on the cover stopped me cold. Thomas Black Elk, my mother's father. I'd never met him, only heard Mom's vague stories of a man who lived too much in the past. I opened the journal, its pages crackling, and saw words in English mixed with Lakota script. This wasn't just a cabin. It was a secret. I sat by the window, the journal in my lap, as wind whistled through the broken roof. My grandfather's words spilled out steady and clear like he was speaking to me. He wrote of Lakota families forced from their land of sacred objects hidden from government hands. They took our hills, our rivers, he wrote, but not our spirit. One entry hit me hard. To my granddaughter, who I'll never meet, one day you'll feel a hollow where your roots should be. Follow it home. My eyes stung. Mom never spoke of this, not the headdress, not the drum, not her father's fight. I traced the Lakota words, my fingers clumsy, wishing I could read them. The drum seemed to hum faintly, or maybe it was my imagination. I thought of Mom, how she'd turn away when I asked about her heritage. Her voice sharp. Let it go, Cammy. Had she known about this room? Had she hidden it, or had she forgotten I closed the journal, my hands trembling? For the first time, I felt close to her, to him, to something bigger than myself. This cabin wasn't empty. It held my family's past, a past I was only beginning to understand. The cabin's silence felt heavier after I found the hidden room. I couldn't stop touching the journal, its leather worn soft under my fingers. I needed answers, so I called Dr. Marlene Eagleton, a Lakota historian at the University of Wyoming. Her voice crackled through the phone, warm but sharp, as I described the headdress, the drum, the pottery. She arrived the next day, her silver braid glinting in the sunlight. She stepped into the hidden room, her boots thudding softly on the creaky floor, and gasped. Camille, she set her eyes wide. These are sacred. The beadwork, the eagle feathers, they're not just artifacts, they're our history. She ran her fingers over the drummet's hide, whispering under her touch. She estimated their value, millions maybe, but her voice turned firm. These belong with the Lakota, not in some museum's glass case. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Millions. I'm a schoolteacher scraping by. That kind of money could change everything. Word spread fast, too fast through the university's network. Reporters called their voicemails, piling up on my phone, each one buzzing like a fly I couldn't swat. I sat by the cabin's broken window, the wind hissing through, and stared at the journal. My grandfather's words echoed. Follow it home. But what was home? I wasn't sure anymore. The crunch of tires on gravel snapped me out of my thoughts. Chase's sleek black SUV pulled up gleaming against the cabin's decay. He stepped out, his polished shoes absurd on the dirt path, and knocked sharply on the door. I opened it, the hinges squealing, and he flashed his lawyer smile. Cammy heard you found some old junk. His voice was smooth, but it grated. He stepped inside, eyeing the hidden room's entrance. Let's make this easy, he said, leaning against the splintered table. I'll trade you the Colorado estate for this place and whatever's in it. You're a teacher, not a historian. You don't need this. My hands clenched. The estate, Mom and Dad's house full of memories, was tempting. Chase kept talking, his words sharp as glass. Come on, you're not cut out for this. Let me handle it. I thought of his big house, his easy life, and how he'd always gotten the best of everything. The drum in the hidden room seemed to hum faintly, or maybe it was my pulse. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't understand, but my throat tightened and I just stood there, the floor creaking under me. Chase left with a smirk, his engine roaring as he drove off. I sank to the floor, the journal in my lap, feeling smaller than ever. That night, the cabin felt like it was closing in. I paced, my footsteps echoing on the warped boards. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Eli's number. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too weak to fight for myself. I dialed, his voice rough when he answered. Cammy, you okay? I mumbled about the artifacts, the money, the cabin. He softened, hinting we could start over if I sold it all. I hung up, my heart racing. Then I found a museum curator's card in my email left from a reporter's tip. I held it, the paper crisp, promising a life without debt, without struggle. I could sell the headdress, the drum, walk away. My grandfather's journal lay open on the table, its pages fluttering in the draft. I read an entry during the relocation era he'd refused gold for those same sacred drums. They're not ours to sell, he wrote. They're our soul. My hands shook. I lit a match, the flame hissing, and watched the curator's card burn, its edges curling black. The smoke stung my eyes, but I felt lighter. I called Dr. Marlene instead, my voice steady for the first time. I want to protect this, I said, not profit from it. The The cabin's silence felt different now, like it was listening, approving. After I burned that curator's card, the cabin felt alive, like it was breathing with me. I sat with Dr. Marlene under the sagging porch, the air thick with sage she'd brought. Her boots scuffed the dirt as she listened to my idea, turning the cabin into a Lakota cultural retreat center, a place for language classes, beadwork, healing stories. "It's bold," she said, her silver braid catching the light, "but it's right." We drove to meet elders Rose White Deer and Thomas Redhawk at a community hall, its walls humming with voices. Rose, her hands gnarled like tree roots, took mine, her eyes deep and kind. "This is what your grandfather wanted," she said, nodding at the journal I carried. Thomas, his voice low, offered to teach drum making. Their trust made my chest ache like I was finally part of something bigger. Back at the cabin, I sketched plans by lantern light, the wick hissing softly. I saw kids learning Lakota words, elders sharing stories, the headdress safe, not sold. For the first time, I felt Mom's presence, like she was watching proud. I wasn't just saving the cabin. I was building a home for my people, for myself. Chase didn't let go so easily. A week later, a letter arrived, its crisp envelope slicing my thumb as I tore it open. He was suing for co-ownership, claiming the will was vague, the cabin undervalued when Mom and Dad died. My stomach dropped to the paper, crackling in my hands. I heard his voice in my head. "You're not cut out for this." He hired a slick lawyer who called me his tone oily, suggesting I settle to avoid embarrassment. Chase spread rumors too, whispering to reporters I was unstable, easily swayed. I stood in the cabin, the floor creaking under my pacing feet, doubt creeping in like damp through the walls. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who stepped aside. What if Chase was right? What if I lost everything, my grandfather's legacy, the elders' trust? The drum in the hidden room seemed silent now, its hum gone. I clutched the journal, my fingers tracing its worn edges, but my heart wavered. I was outmatched, just like I'd always been. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if the cabin itself was urging me to fight. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, the judge's gavel tapping like a metronome. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands sweaty, as Chase's lawyer painted me as fragile, unfit to manage valuable property. My lawyer from a native advocacy group squeezed my arm, her pen scratching notes. I'd brought the journal, its weight steadying me. When my turn came, I stood, my voice trembling at first. I told the court about finding the hidden room, about my grandfather's words. I opened the journal, the pages rustling, and read, "Our soul isn't in land or gold. It's in what we carry forward." My voice grew stronger, filling the room. I spoke of the retreat center, the elders' support, the kids who'd learned their language. Chase stared at the floor, his jaw tight. The judge, her glasses glinting, leaned forward. When she ruled, her gavel cracked sharp. The decedent's intent was clear. Ms. Halbrook has honored that legacy. I exhaled, the room spinning. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky wide. I held the journal to my chest, feeling my grandfather's strength, my mother's quiet love. I'd found my voice, and no one, not Chase, not doubt, could take it away. The cabin transformed before my eyes, its broken bones mended by community hands. The Halbrook Cultural Retreat opened on a crisp spring day, the air alive with laughter and sage smoke. Volunteers had rebuilt the roof, its new shingles gleaming, while the floorboards, sanded smooth, no longer groaned. Inside, Rose White Deer taught beadwork, her needle clicking as kids threaded red and black beads. Thomas Redhawk's drum-making class filled the air with soft thuds, each beat like a heartbeat. I walked through the scent of cedar strong, watching elders share Lakota stories, their voices weaving history into the present. A young boy practicing hello in Lakota grinned at me, his tongue tripping over the syllables. I clutched my grandfather's journal, its leather warm in my hands, feeling Mom's quiet pride, her half-Lakota heart finally at rest. This wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a home for our language, our healing, our people. I stood on the porch, the wind gentle now, and looked at the mountains. For years I'd been invisible, but here, surrounded by voices and purpose, I saw myself clearly. This was my legacy, built not from money, but from love. Eli showed up one afternoon, his truck rumbling into the retreat's lot. He leaned against the door, his boots scuffing the gravel, and smiled like nothing had changed. "This place is incredible, Cammy," he said, his voice soft. He hinted at a fresh start, his eyes searching mine. I remembered his words, how he'd wanted a woman who fought. I looked at the cabin, its windows glowing with lamplight, and felt no pull to go back. "Eli," I said, my voice steady. I didn't lose myself. "I found me. You wanted someone else." His smile faded, but he nodded, the gravel crunching as he walked away. I watched his truck disappear, the dust settling. Letting him go felt like shedding an old skin light and final. I turned back to the retreat, the sound of children's laughter spilling out, and knew I was exactly where I belonged. The naming ceremony came at dusk, the sky streaked with pink. A fire crackled in the circle, its sparks dancing upward. Rose-white Deer stood, her shawl rustling, and called me forward. The drumbeat pulsed low and steady as she spoke. "You've returned to us," she said, "Wiakathepi, she who returns to the house." The name settled over me like a warm blanket. I faced the crowd, elders, kids, Marlene, and spoke, my voice clear. I thought I was invisible, but I just hadn't been seen by my own eyes. The fire hissed the stars bright above. I felt my grandfather's hand, my mother's smile guiding me home. A young Lakota girl approached me at the retreat, her small hands clutching a drawing. The paper crinkled as she handed it over, a sketch of the cabin under a glowing moon, its windows bright. "My grandma says we can come here to remember," she said, her voice soft but clear. I knelt, the grass cool beneath me, and saw my reflection in her dark eyes. The retreat hummed behind us, voices weaving Lakota words, laughter rising like smoke. I tucked the drawing into my pocket, its edges soft against my fingers. This place, once broken, now held our stories, our future. I wasn't invisible anymore. That night, I sat by the fire, its crackle filling the quiet. I opened my grandfather's journal, the leather warm, and read the final page. "You found the key," he wrote, "not to the door, but to yourself." The words sank deep like roots. The firelight danced on the cabin walls, now strong whole. I saw Mom's smile, felt her half Lakota heart in mine. I closed the journal, the pages whispering shut. "Wiakathepi, she who returns to the house." I was home, carrying my grandfather's legacy, ready for the next daughter to find hers.